Um, you might just hear a little bit of rain in the background. That's because it's just started raining here, and I've got a window, and the rain is maybe louder than I'd anticipated. So sorry about that, but it's nice to be connected to nature. So yeah, I'm very happy to welcome you to this stream. I can see people are joining already. That's great. I thought I'd warm up the stream by reading just a little bit of inspirational text from The Real World of Technology by Ursula Franklin. So Ursula Franklin talks about technology as a practice. She over the course of, I think, 6 lectures, which are written up in book form, she introduces a really nice approach to thinking about technology in the real world, and sort of exploring both its, well, she divides them into holistic technologies and prescriptive technologies, technologies of control and technologies of work. And this little piece is just about holistic technologies and how it applies to craft. So holistic technologies are normally associated with the notion of craft. Artisans, be they potters, weavers, metalsmiths, or cooks, control the process of their own work from beginning to finish. Their hands and minds make situational decisions as the work proceeds, be it on the thickness of the pot, or the shape of the knife edge, or the doneness of the roast. These are decisions that only they can make while they are working, and they draw on their own experience, each time applying it to a unique situation. The products of their work are one of a kind. However similar pots may look to the casual observer, each piece is made as if it was unique. Using holistic technologies does not mean that people do not work together, but the way in which they work together leaves the individual worker in control of a particular process of creating or doing something. I think this is a really nice aspect of craft, in that it foregrounds the role of the hand in making, and the kind of improvisational aspect of making, that you don't start off with a perfect idea about what you're going to make and then make it. It's much more a feedback with the material. So on that note, it's really a great honour to welcome Vernelle Noel to this talk series. This is the second in the series. The first was from Laura Devendorf on weaving with EduCAD software. She actually introduced me to Vernelle, so it's very nice to introduce her next. So Vernelle is a really interdisciplinary scholar, and you'll see that over the next 45 minutes or so, as a design scholar, but also an artist. But if you don't mind, Vernelle, if you'd like to sort of introduce yourself in the context of your work.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you might be. I'll introduce myself via a slide I put together. But thank you so much for having me here. My name is Vernelle Noel, and I look forward to sharing with you today and the questions that we will have. All right. So let me share my screen. And Alex, tell me if this is sharing well, etc. Okay. Okay. All right.
That looks great.
All is well? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So first of all, Alex, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for doing this. So about me, I'm, a quick, long but short story. I started off doing civil engineering back in my native country of Trinidad and Tobago. I then got the opportunity to do my Bachelor of Architecture, which is what I really wanted to do. I did that at Howard University, practiced professionally, then got the opportunity to do my graduate studies in architectural research at MIT. I worked at the Singapore University of Technology and Design for a bit, then went to Penn State to do my PhD. During my PhD, I gave a TEDx talk on the power of making, which I think Alex shared. And currently, I'm an assistant professor of architecture and interactive computing at Georgia Tech. I'm also the director of the Situated Computation and Design Lab here at Georgia Tech. It's an interdisciplinary research lab, and some of the work I'll share with you today is foundation for the works, projects, thoughts, questions that the lab seeks to answer. Okay. So in my research, I examine craft practices, as Alex intimated and read in his introduction. So I examine craft practices and knowledges, digital practices or automated practices and knowledges, how they influence each other, and how they intersect with society in terms of our practice or pedagogy or education or learning and our publics. So how it touches the ground. I investigate how these different ways of seeing, describing, and engaging with the world can reveal opportunities, gaps, and problems in design practice, design knowledge, and in our society. Three problems I address in my work include the disappearance or erasure of craft knowledges, practices, and communities. Two, the omission or exclusion of craft knowledges and communities from discourses in design and computing. And three, social and cultural implications of computation or computing in and design. Two questions that drive my work are: how might computational ideas, methods, and technologies repair craft and cultural practices? And two, how might practices and labors in craft cultures repair computational ideas and practices or frameworks? The vision of my work is to revive and reveal possibilities in craft and craft cultures for repair, innovation, invention, and advancement of technology, society, and culture. Now, when it comes to algorithmic patterns, I engage with them through shapes. A shape is an arrangement of basic elements in space, and as humans, those shapes, those elements are of zero dimension, such as points, one dimensions in the form of lines, two dimensions in the form of planes, three dimensions in the form of solids. So we have these shapes that surround us, right? Shapes have position, they have orientation, size, they have coordinate systems. So they are ways of describing, situating, and placing them. But we can also carry out operations on shapes, right? We can carry out mathematical operations of some sort on shapes. We can add shapes, we can subtract shapes, we can transform shapes, we could translate shapes, rotate shapes, reflect shapes, glide, reflect shapes, scale, etc. So these are two-dimensional transformations, but we also have three-dimensional transformations of shapes, which also pull from previous transformations I shared, right? But this time you might have rotor reflection, screw rotation, etc. So we transform shapes by operations. And in my field of design computation, one of the foundational frameworks or theories for manipulating shapes is called shape grammars. And shape grammars are a way of calculating design with shapes. It can be used for analysis, description, and the creation of design. And what I'll share with you today is how I use the algorithms of shapes to document design craft practices. But before I get into this craft and its relationship to algorithmic patterns, I'll first share with you the culture, the history, and the people within which this craft is embedded, as it would not exist without them. It would be a disservice for me to decouple the history and the people from the craft. All right. So I'll talk about the craft of wire bending within the context of the Trinidad Carnival. So this is an engraving from 1888 of carnival celebrations in Port of Spain, Trinidad. French planters introduced carnival to Trinidad in the 1780s, and during enslavement, Africans engaged in carnival festivities. However, after slavery was abolished in 1834, they reinvented Carnival to celebrate their freedom, express their creativity, their aesthetic sensibilities, and reclaim their humanity in the face of a system that considered them less than human. While for Europeans, participating in Carnival was for fun and frolic. For those of African descent and those formerly enslaved, Carnival was like a religion. It was cathartic, a psychological release of tensions from domination, segregation, and violent, inhumane systems of control. The term Trinidad Carnival or Trinidad and Tobago Carnival does not bound the geographic location of the carnival, but rather refers to its origin and the main elements that define it. The main elements being the masquerade, steel pan, which was invented in Trinidad and Tobago, and the calypso, the music native to Trinidad and Tobago. Several carnivals have spawned from the Trinidad Carnival to other parts of the world, as you see on this slide. For those in the UK, there's Notting Hill Carnival. In the US, there are carnivals all over. This weekend was Atlanta Carnival, New York. There are several carnivals around the world, Caribana, etc. Right? So Carnival is about design, and design in Carnival is about celebrating resistance and emancipation from that enslavement. These are images of Jab Jabs and Blue Devil characters in Juve in Carnival, and they originate from the celebration of resistance from enslavement. Carnival and design in it is also about creativity and joy. It's about seemingly disparate things dwelling together. Enslavement and freedom, good and evil, scary and beautiful. It's a space of entanglements. It's also rooted in community with social interactions and togetherness, mentoring and cooperation happening within the design and making aspects of Carnival. It's about community engagement with people creating opportunities to include their communities, have events for communities. So it's all of these things, right? It's also about public education. This is a photo from 1957 of George Bailey's winning Carnival Band, which he titled Back to Africa. And so I think of Carnival as the internet of that time. Public education in art, history, the society, all of this wrapped up in Carnival. The people portraying and educating our publics on their histories, real or imagined, past and future. And in Carnival, we have the craft of wire bending. It began in the 1930s in Carnival, and in it, wire, fiberglass rods, and other linear materials are bent and shaped to create structures which are expressions of creativity, innovation, and technical skill. Unfortunately, the craft of wire bending is dying. These are photos of expert wirebender Stephen Derrick performing wire bending. He has unfortunately since passed away. So this is urgent, right? In terms of expert practitioners passing away, craft passing away. And these are kings and queens of Carnival, which I define as dancing sculptures. And wire bending is integral to the design and construction of these dancing sculptures, in addition to costumes, right? But these elements, they combine engineering, architecture, and sculpture to make these fantastic sculptures that are performed that again demonstrate creativity, innovation, and technical skill. So some of the issues occurring in craft practices today, including wire bending, are that there's little to no documentation sometimes of these knowledges, and so The knowledge of these craft practices remain tacit, unwritten, and taught sometimes via lengthy apprenticeships. Secondly, slow transmission of craft skills and knowledges. Thirdly, dying practitioners, as I mentioned, and changing practices due to global, societal, and technological changes. But why is addressing this important? Well, craft is embedded in historical, social, and political frames, and their disappearance signals the erasure of histories, cultures, and identities, to name a few. Secondly, because these knowledges are tied to its practitioners, it means that when they pass away, they take that knowledge with them, making it more challenging to pass on that knowledge and that culture. Thirdly, studies have shown a link between craftsmanship and social ties. So, strong craft skills, strong ties to a community, weak craft skills, weak ties to a community, and we want strong community ties. And fourthly, these practices are languages, ways of communicating and telling stories. They are a voice. So, now on to the mathematics of wire bending. So, this is a photo of Stephen Derrick performing wire bending again. And one of the first things I did was um, address the problem of documentation of this knowledge, how we document and how we translate or transmit this dying craft knowledge. How do we capture it? So I developed a computational tool to document this craft, pulling off of that shape grammar framework that I mentioned earlier. So on the left is Stephen Derrick. On the right, my descriptions of wire bending using shapes, symbols, operations, and rules based on my observations and interviews with him and other wire benders, my examination of their artifacts, and my participation in the craft to make this tacit, embodied knowledge explicit. So this is a sort of vocabulary. On the right is an image of some of the materials that Mr. Derrick was using. On the left, drawings representing those materials in the shape of in the form of shapes. Here, this is so the grammar. It's a larger sort of corpus and body of work. So I'm just showing you a little bit of the techniques here. In this slide, this shows the steps or the algorithms to create certain shapes that are used in wire bending. Right. So this is a description on the left, sort of the starting material, which is wire, and the steps to make certain connections as well as textual descriptions. Here's an example of a rule for from the grammar. Uh, Below that, the steps to make that rule, and below an image showing what that rule looks like in the in this slide, this is another example of a technique that Stephen Derrick uses where he's hammering the end of hollow aluminum rods. On the left, the starting shape of an aluminum rod. On the right, after it is hammered. And below, you could see an image of him doing that there. This is another example of a technique with the steps or the algorithm to create that particular connection. And below, you see an image of that. So these are some of the rules of the grammar. Like I mentioned, it's a lot of rules describing the practice, but it contains the material vocabulary, certain parameters, the materials that are being used, etc., and text describing how these techniques are done to support these drawings. This is another image of some more rules. So I named the grammar the Bailey-Derrick grammar after Albert Bailey and Stephen Derrick. And this grammar computationally describes technical knowledge in wire bending. It's a series of drawings that describe the materials, steps, and techniques in wire bending with shapes, allowing analysis, transmission of expertise for education and practice. These are photos of Albert Bailey on the left, Stephen Derrick on the right. This is an example of how the grammar facilitates documentation of the design and fabrication process in the craft. So the grammar externalizes tacit rules, in wire benders so that these rules are less tied to their originators, which is particularly important when craftspersons are dying and or retiring from their practice. It facilitates documentation and recording of the design and making process and sheds light on the craft's algorithmic dimensions and opens it up for expansion and inquiry. So I created this tool and I hypothesized that it could address this problem of capturing knowledge, right? But is that true? So I conducted a series of workshops to test that hypothesis and evaluate the grammar, evaluate how it actually performs. So these are photos from a workshop I conducted with students and teachers in a high school in Trinidad and Tobago. Um, in the first part of the experiment, participants had to design and make um, an artifact using wire bending materials, tools, and techniques because I wanted to get a sense of what they knew, right? So after making their artifacts, they would work in teams. They would then communicate how they made that artifact with another team without anyone seeing what the other made, right? So whether by notes or drawings, they had to communicate how they made what they made so that another team could replicate it. Then in the second part of the experiment, I taught them the grammar, how it works, technical knowledge behind the craft, how to use it to speculate, to explore, how to document with it, etc. Taught them about the materials, the connections, and then did some practical skills, so demonstrated how you make these bends, how you wrap tape, etc. The practical part of the craft. And so they would do the same thing, design and build an artifact, and then using those instructions, pass it off to another team who would attempt to replicate what they made, right? Uh, this time they had the grammar to help them. So before learning the grammar, there were some challenges like, of course, conflicting instructions, a lack of knowledge of what to do, poor craftsmanship, missing information, and a lack of confidence in exactly what to do. However, after learning the grammar, there was now an agreed standard for communication. Craftsmanship improved, replication was able to happen, and participants expressed an increased confidence in knowing that okay, what they can do. It facilitated replication, as I mentioned. So the artifacts on the left in these photos are originals. The artifacts on the right are replications, and this is just using instructions, so it works, right? But one of the most surprising and uh, coolest things I think coming out of this experiment was this new collaborative approach to the craft. Currently, wire bending is singular with one person to one artifact or many artifacts, but the grammar opened up the practice so that many people could now participate in the making of one artifact. It facilitated a collaborative approach to wire bending, which currently does not exist and which appealed to participants, further reinforcing these qualities, these values around mentoring, cooperation, and social interaction that I mentioned before. It also facilitates additional ways of engaging in the craft, from design to documentation to analysis, fabrication, and assembly. Again, opening up the craft for multiple people to participate. So in addition to creating that hands-on analog algorithmic tool, I explored software and what might software for wire bending include or do. The structure for the software involves a series of points and how straight and curved lines might redescribe a surface when given points of connection, right? This is just a diagram, a graph showing you what it does in a very easy way. Um, so I gave the software a surface, and on the right, you see it redescribing that surface based on points that I enter. And when this moves to the side, this is how the software redescribes surface using lines based on the points I've given it, right? Using straight lines. This is another example, same surface, this time using curves and another set of points. This is how the software redescribes that surface using lines, but this time using curved lines that are navigating their way through a series of points. This is another example using curved lines. You're just seeing, how it does what it does, and this is the resulting redescription. And so the question is, these different patterns that are able to emerge by redescribing these surfaces. And this piece of software is to be used in the design of not just objects, but in dancing sculptures and carnival. That's the idea, right? How do we redesign or rethink dancing sculptures in a carnival, such that, for me, that it highlights the craft of wire bending as well as architecture, right? So we're thinking at the scale of the costume, really, to architecture. How might it be used in certain ways for us to rethink dancing sculptures and what is expressing the tectonic, the technical innovations of the craft. Okay, just a digital image of that, so that we could get multiple designs generated for how we might think through and use wire bending to create structures. When it comes to fabricating, right, so that's design. When it comes to fabricating, I also explored digital ways of engaging in the craft, using CNC machines, digital design software, like I've shown, 3D printing, etc. And this was to address, one, the lack of participation in the craft by those interested in using computational technology, so opening up the craft for participation there, and two, the absence of women, children, and those with physical limitations, as wire bending can require a dexterity and strength that may be out of reach for some, right? So I created 2 additional methods that involve bending with a CNC wire bender, 3D printing, etc. These are some sculptures that I've made using just the grammar and hand tools, right? And their interactions with light light and shadow, I should say, is what I particularly like with these line sculptures. Images of artifacts that I've made. This is the structure for a boat that I made for an exhibition on the left, the sort of beginning structure on the right after it's been complete. An image of a sculpture I did for an art exhibition. These are images of artifacts that my students made using the grammar and hand tools. These are images of artifacts they made using the CNC wire bender, the grammar and hand tools, and here using the software that I developed that would give 3D printed connections as a result of designs. I didn't show the fabrication part of the software. More images of student work. So after teaching my students this, I wanted us to explore wire bending at the architectural scale, right? So these are a few connections that we tested based on the Bailey direct grammar. So we structurally tested the performance of these materials and these connections in order to make a pavilion. This is an image of a pavilion built using wire bending techniques, wire bending principles. This is another image of it. And these are additional rules for the grammar that came out of our testing and building this pavilion, right? So these are rules that would apply at the architectural scale. New rules that would apply. Using the software I develop, I also create drawings as new expressions of algorithmic patterns and wire bending. These are some images using the software I just showed you and the drawing machine, because I find lines quite beautiful. But drawing these patterns, these lines, I just find beautiful. These are some images of pieces. And so these are some of the results of this investigation into craft and design in the Trinidad Carnival, right? On unpacking histories that are hardly spoken of, making new communities, new tools for education and practice, new production and design systems, new conceptual definitions, expressions, tectonics, and structures, right? This is just a little taste of um, what has resulted from looking into this craft thus far. Now I'll share with you algorithmic patterns and machine learning in a project that the Mozilla Foundation had a call to fund ideas for projects that would examine the effects of artificial intelligence on racial justice. My approach to the call was using AI to celebrate cultures, histories, and design and creativity in Carnival. I wanted to use machine learning as a partner, a creative partner, to include in this context and to include people in the context on discourses on AI, because we aren't often included in those discourses. And so the two questions framing this project were: how might we educate our publics about artificial intelligence and machine learning through familiar cultural design practices? And how might we educate our publics about the Trinidad Carnival through AI and machine learning? The vision was an empowered, creative community that would engage with, learn about, and interrogate artificial intelligence to benefit themselves and contribute to global discourses on AI through cultural practices in Carnival, as we are already implicated in decisions around big data, influencing our politics, etc. So what might the result be if we trained a machine with a data set of dancing sculptures? So, created, built would be a better word, built a data set of dancing sculptures. And if these are some of the resulting imaginary or imagined dancing sculptures that the machine gave us, right? Here. So these design possibilities for dancing sculptures and design in Carnival can reconnect people to their history, reconnect them to possible futures, or connect them to possible futures, while also having an impact on design and making cultures, with people now having the skills of wire bending in different technological or traditional ways, but also designing and making new design possibilities using AI. But this project doesn't end here. I created an online virtual gallery to showcase these AI generated dancing sculptures. The exhibit also includes audio describing and educating our publics on Carnival and artificial intelligence. These are AI generated images of Jab Jabs and Blue Devils in Juve. And again, what these things are is not clear to me, but I find them absolutely beautiful and things to think with through design. The virtual Juve experience showcases these AI generated Jab Jabs, Blue Devils, Jab Molasses, with audio describing the history of Carnival, of Juve, and the exhibit with videos and music to create the feeling of Juve with its scary, beautiful parts. So there are like about 5 aspects on the web page that I have, but these are 3, I would say, main parts. But it asks the question of how we might use digital tools and methods to touch the ground and to reach our publics. So what I want you all to do is to join me in the virtual gallery. But Alex, I remember I saw your email and you asked if we could probably take some questions before we go there. Maybe we could do that.
Yeah, that'd be
Okay.
nice, I think.
Let me stop sharing.
But we should make sure we have time. How do you think we should save 10 minutes to look through the virtual gallery, or?
Up to you. Let's just see what happens. Let's just see
Okay.
what happens.
Yeah. Lovely, really amazing talk, and just so many different aspects on what algorithmic pattern might mean. Really fantastic grounding. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I think the first thing that strikes me is your approach to heritage. So I suppose I think you occasionally use the words preservation, but also words like restoration, remediation, configuration, repair, revive, reveal. I've been collecting these.
Yeah.
It seems to be all about not making things fixed, but really keeping them alive. And reading a little bit about wire bending, it seems it's something that's always taken on new materials. It's always explored new forms. So what is it that you're kind of preserving, and what is it that you're changing? Like the idea of a grammar making it more possible to collaborate is just really mind-blowing. I love that. So yeah.
Sure. So I never use the word preservation,
Okay.
right? Because it's so loaded. So I use the word repair, and I pulled that from Sennett's description of repair, where he talks about restoration, remediation, and reconfiguration. Um, and within those frames, restoration is kind of looks to the past, where the one doing the investigation is kind of a servant of the past to understand context of what was happening at that time. Remediation, where you're pulling in new parts, new methods to improve old ways of doing things. And reconfiguration, that's more kind of radical, with small changes you might make and considering their larger implications, right? So this way, there's breadth in the investigations, because some things aren't one thing. Some things are both restoration and remediation. There is no fine line separating them that clearly, right? So that's my approach to looking into craft practices, and it's based on what we see that's necessary, or what the community needs at that time. Because there's no need for me to be doing AI and dancing sculptures when people don't have the skills to make it, right? So it really depends on what's discovered on that site, understanding ways of making, values, etc.
And I think you also don't draw a hard line between the past and the future. You said that Carnival was about it had a role in educating something about history, but you said real or imagined, past and future. So the idea of imagined histories and future histories, it's sort of at a time when it seems like you're seeing wire bending is dying to some extent, possibly in the hand of market forces. Is it about kind of reimagining a role for Carnival, making it gain control of its form again, or something like this?
Good question. Good question. It's Carnival is so multifaceted. One answer might not do it justice. But from my lens, my desire for Carnival, understanding the realities of globalism, capitalism, and all these things. All right, I'm you know I'm aware of those forces, as you mentioned. But what we, I think, need to get back to is our engagement in making and designing and coming together around these practices to showcase our innovation, right? When those things are outsourced, so to speak. And this morning I was thinking of that. Like I all of this that you've seen here, this is but a part of Carnival. And the main part I think people see is the party, the parade, but this is all the richness of which that parade is just a small part of, right? And so I think that when we do not understand these histories, when we don't know about these histories, how they are connected with the people's culture, histories of slavery, histories of wanting to let a system know that I too am human, that we can, or it can run the risk of being trivialized in ways that hide or don't um, give honor to its real roots, would be my response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I should pass on to some of the audience questions. There's one from Kate Sikio, who's a choreographer, and so she asks about, does the grammar or software address how the body moves?
Thank you very much for your question, Kate. So the grammar currently does not, right? The grammar currently captures the technique, so it captures the what, and but not necessarily the how. In another project, I use the Connect, and which I didn't show here. There's only so much time to engage digitally with costumes that's able to um, capture the body's movement and how it might interact digitally with costuming. And also a project in which I use um, sort of traditional characters in Carnival to remake new ones. So the answer to your question is no, because this is just like one part of how we use the grammar, how you capture bodies movement, and the actual how, that's another step and another layer to the book. But currently it does not do that.
Yeah, I think this is super interesting because I suppose no notation aims to be complete. And as you say, it sort of formalizes maybe a way of communicating with each other, and it kind of symbolizes a voice in that way. But there's so much of that voice which it doesn't seek to capture about the actual movement, about the gesture, the kind of flexibility of the structures that's made the balance. These kind of all come out of the real world interaction.
Correct. So there'll always be things that we missed and that we aren't able to capture, right? But part of it is, yes, there is the possible capturing of it, but maybe the ability to learn from each other by these interactions, as you mentioned, is what's more important at this time for this community, right? Getting them back interacting with each other. But absolutely, in terms of attempting to document the embodiment of it, um, yeah, that's still left to be done.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean it doesn't have massive value, because it gives a new perspective on something. It allows it to carry forward and be communicated.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's have a look at this one. Elizabeth Wicks, how did the grammar interact with the idea of impossibility? Did it challenge the original makers with what might be impossible, or provide tools to new makers in making possible connections possible?
Did it challenge? Okay, so let me answer the first part first. So
Okay.
so I went back to Albert Bailey, Stephen Derrick, his name escapes me now, who else? But after doing the grammar, or as I was developing it, I would give it back to them for their feedback. And his name escapes me now, but he says this could definitely help me. I have not had the opportunity to go back and do like a proper study with the wirebenders, just because of time, resources, etc. But I have shared the grammar with them. Um, as for the students, they were still learning the practice, so there was not much, let's say, innovation and invention. However, the um, last part of the study I showed, which I did with my students, these are architecture and design students, I think their understanding and knowledge of design, uh, they were able to make some kind of new connections and see new ways of using wire bending. What they did lack, however, unlike students in Trinidad, was they lacked the ability to understand these materials as things that behave. So they kept seeing them as lines, whether they would be springy, bendy, they could only see them as straight lines. And I found that interesting, that we've abstracted design so much to some degree that students weren't able to design with the material behaviors. So that was something interesting.
Yeah, I guess There is something really interesting about how you're approaching the idea of an algorithm, because if you think, often algorithms are described as recipes for something like baking. And if you think about a recipe for a cake, it's quite hard to change that without ending up with something that's not a cake anymore.
Yeah, yeah,
This, it seems to be made, you say you have to learn it before really starting to improvise, but it seems like that's what it's made for. It's made for opening up possibilities.
yeah.
Uh, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So there's so much that I wish I had time to do, right? But there are different ways that we could break up and rethink some of these connections and test new ones and their impossibilities, as Elizabeth is asking. But yeah, because we now have sort of foundation on what exists, we can play with those things to explore new possibilities. For example, with the pavilion, right? Those are new tectonic connections that emerged from that grammar to explore at the architectural scale. So that would continue.
Mm. So how about applying it to other existing practices? Like Few asks about whether
Mhm.
you can apply it to toys, which they
Absolutely.
see in their local home
Absolutely.
country.
It runs the gamut of whatever you want to make, right? But the context within, for example, in Trinidad and Tobago, I don't see much wire bending toys, but I know, like I've gotten wire bending toys from friends in Africa and I think Mexico. Um, but it's just a different context. This scale within which I am looking into it or started looking into it is at the scale of the costume and the dance and sculpture in Carnival, now into the scale of architecture, but it runs the gamut of toys. I could see kids making toys out of the grammar. Yeah. Mhm.
Great. Yes, this question from Kate O'Brien. Do you plan to collect other grammars from other artists? I'm curious about what it's like to join the grammars of two makers. I think that's super. Yeah.
Yeah.
You say it tends to be quite a solitary activity, but so what was it
Mhm.
like to take these two?
So Derek learned from Bailey.
Ah,
So all that I saw in Derek were what Bailey had, and Stephen Derek, like he innovated on new connections. Albert Bailey was still doing very traditional connections, right? So the grammar pays homage to both of them, right? Um, I do plan and desire to understand and document wire bending in other places, in other countries, other artists, etc. Yes. What it was like to join the grammar. So I didn't, as I think in my previous answer, didn't really join them. One learned from the other, and I paid homage to them both by naming it that way.
okay, so one more question then before we go into the exhibition. Is it possible to get a copy of the grammar to learn and practice the techniques?
Absolutely, absolutely, it is. I have. I could share with Alex the paper I have on it. The paper does not have all the rules. It is developing, but I'll share the paper with Alex.
Okay, yeah, I'll add the links to the
Sure.
algorithmicpattern.org web page and also the video for people who are watching later.
Mhm.
Great. So shall we go into the exhibition then? I've got the link here.
Sure. Let me also pull it up. Hold on. Let me get my screen going.
So is the idea that people keep this video playing and
How should we do this? How should we do this? How should we do this? I don't know, Alex. How should we do this? I think between trying to figure out the number of USB-C ports and a mouse I have now, I'm wondering. Okay, so share the link, right? I'd love
Mhm.
if people could go into the link, right? What I will do is I'll share my slides again just so I can show the process, and then I will go in there. All right?
Great. Yes.
All right. So give me 1 second. We have a few minutes.
Yeah, I think when people go in there will be your voice playing.
Yes.
So
They
should
could
they pause that?
they could lower the volume, they could pause it, they could turn the volume off, but they'll have to find the location of the thing. So maybe they just lower the volumes on their phones or computers.
Okay.
Yeah. Shares. All right, you're seeing my screen?
There, yes.
Yeah? All right. So you can go to carnival-ai.com, and this will be the main page. You could go up to that Carnival plus AI, and we'll go to the virtual gallery exhibit. And on that page, you see that there are several virtual galleries. They're all the same thing. It's only because Mozilla Hubs has a limitation of, I think, 20 something people in a room. I've created several galleries, but we could all go into gallery one. That's the link that I have there. So let me let me try to join you. Oh, I see people. I see Elizabeth. Hold on. All right.
Yeah, I think I'm getting feedback from other people in the room listening to the stream.
Yes. So I think all I want is just to go around in the room. You all could do that. And there are these moving images. You can take screenshots of it, share it on Instagram. We also have you all aren't seeing my screen, are you?
Yes.
Are you seeing my screen now?
Yes.
Right. And you can take screenshots of these moving images, for example. Right. Oops. Right. You can take screenshots, and also, for example, here, this opens to a sort of guest page that you can record your experience, give us feedback on them, etc. But please take your time and experiment, explore. And there's also the Juve exhibition and the Mass exhibition for you to enjoy and give us your feedback. It always happens. Let me stop sharing. Okay, but that's it. I just wanted to people to experiment with it, go to all the exhibits, all the gallery exhibits, and give us your feedback now. Okay.
Brilliant. Okay, so for the live people, we'll continue interacting in the gallery space, and for the people watching in catch up in the future, I hope everything is good for you, and that you can also join us in the have a look around the exhibition too. There's the link to it in the direct link to the first gallery in the description.
Yeah,
and
you could just go to carnival-ai.com and in there you'll see all the galleries because it's more than that.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much then, Vernelle. Thanks also to Claire Hale, who has produced the live captions for us, which I'll also add to the archived video. And I think that's us done. So the next talk will be by Ron Eglash on generative justice. Yes, the full title of his talk is escapes me at the moment, but I think that would be very interesting too. Just one more question, actually. Fractal, Ron Eglasch's work often talks about fractal structures in architecture and other forms. Would you say that, I mean, with it being a grammar, would you say that fractal structures naturally come out of this wire-bending work?
Ron's work has been very influential in my work. I would not use the word fractals in the work that I'm doing, though.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. A short question, short answer.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, we'll bring it to a close then and continue in the exhibition space. So I'll stop this stream now. Thank you, everyone. And yeah, look forward to seeing you in the exhibition. Thanks for
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Alex.
Thank
Okay.
you. Bye.